Step away from the Tahoe. ID and registration, now.
I'm buying gas. What crime do you think you're investigating?
Loitering and refusing orders. Turn around or you're going in cuffs.
Touch me without cause, and you just arrested a federal OIG auditor on camera.
Officer Kyle Vance had been patrolling the streets of Pineville for just over 4 years when he made the decision that would incinerate his career and cost the taxpayers of this quiet county a staggering $4.8 million. He was 29 years old, possessed of a dangerous combination of limited life experience and absolute authority, and he walked through his days with the swagger of a man who believed the badge on his chest granted him immunity from consequence. On a scorching Thursday afternoon in mid-July at a gas station just off the interstate, he received a call from a store manager whose prejudices were about to collide with federal supremacy. The subject of the call was Marcus Thorne, a 54-year-old senior field auditor for the Office of Inspector General. Thorne wasn't just a government employee. He was a man who spent his life hunting down corruption, waste, and abuse of power within the federal system. What Vance did next, ignoring protocol, mocking the law, and arresting a high-ranking federal official in front of a dozen witnesses, would become a case study in how arrogance blinds officers to reality. Before we get into the details of this catastrophe, tell me, where are you tuning in from today? If you appreciate stories where the truth finally wins, please hit that subscribe button. We need to keep shining a light on these incidents. The stop-and-go station sits on the edge of Highway 95, a sprawling concrete island of heat and diesel fumes. It's the kind of place where long-haul truckers and weary families stop to stretch their legs and grab a cold soda. It was 1:15 p.m. The sun was beating down on the asphalt, making the air shimmer. Marcus Thorne had pulled his black Chevrolet Tahoe into pump number 6. The vehicle was spotless, dark-tinted windows, unmarked with standard government plates that to the untrained eye might just look like a generic fleet registration. Marcus was a man of precision. He wore a crisp navy blue suit despite the heat. His tie perfectly knotted his demeanor calm and observant. He had been with the OIG for 25 years. He had audited entire agencies, testified before Senate committees, and put corrupt mayors and senators behind bars with nothing more than a spreadsheet and a keen eye for lies. He was on his way to a field office to conduct a surprise audit on grant misappropriation. He wasn't looking for trouble. He was looking for premium unleaded. He stood by the pump, checking his emails on his phone, waiting for the tank to fill. He didn't speak to anyone. He didn't glare at anyone. He just existed. But for Jim Miller, the 45-year-old manager of the stop-and-go Marcus's existence was an irritation. Jim Miller watched from behind the counter, eyes narrowed. He had been managing this station for a decade, and he prided himself on keeping the riffraff out. In Miller's limited worldview, a black man in a suit driving a brand-new $70,000 SUV didn't fit the demographic of his usual clientele. To him, it screamed drug money or stolen vehicle. Marcus had been at the pump for exactly 4 minutes, the time it takes to fill a large tank, but in Miller's mind he had been loitering for 20. Miller didn't see a federal auditor. He saw a threat. He watched Marcus tap on his phone and decided that he must be coordinating a deal. It couldn't possibly be that the man was checking a flight schedule or reading a brief. Miller turned to his cashier, a young woman who looked bored, and muttered, "I don't like the looks of that guy at Pump 6. He's casing the place." Before she could even respond, Miller grabbed the phone and dialed the non-emergency line for the Pineville police. "Yeah, this is Jim down at the Stop and Go. I got a suspicious individual here. He's been loitering at the pumps for a long time, blocking paying customers. He's driving a big black SUV, looks like he might be waiting for a drop. Can you send someone over to clear him out?" The dispatcher asked the standard questions. Was he threatening anyone? No. Was he brandishing a weapon? No. But Miller insisted, "He's making my customers nervous. He just doesn't belong here." The call went out. Officer Kyle Vance was 2 miles away, sitting in an air-conditioned cruiser, bored and looking for action. When the call came in, "Suspicious male, black SUV, possible loitering,"
Vance didn't hear a request to investigate. He heard an invitation to hunt. Vance had a reputation in the department, though not the kind you want. He was known for pretext stops, finding the smallest excuse to pull someone over just to fish for bigger crimes. He had a history of aggression that his supervisors, mostly older men tired of paperwork, had repeatedly swept under the rug. Vance flipped on his lights, spun the cruiser around, and floored it toward the highway. He didn't check the license plate number the dispatcher gave him. He didn't run a background check. He just saw a target. Vance arrived at the gas station with a screech of tires that turned every head in the parking lot. He didn't pull into a parking spot. He pulled his cruiser directly in front of Marcus Thorne's Tahoe, blocking him in at the pump. It was an aggressive tactical maneuver usually reserved for felons fleeing a crime scene, not a man topping off his gas tank. Marcus looked up from his phone, his expression unreadable. He didn't flinch. He didn't look scared. He simply capped the gas tank, hung up the nozzle, and waited. Vance stepped out of his vehicle, hand already resting on the grip of his holstered service weapon, a subtle threat, but a threat nonetheless. He didn't adjust his hat or offer a greeting. He marched straight into Marcus's personal space, his young face set in a scowl that he thought looked authoritative but actually just looked petulant. "Step away from the vehicle," Vance barked, his voice loud enough to carry over the hum of the highway. Marcus stood his ground, leaning casually against the rear fender of the Tahoe. He looked at the officer over the rim of his glasses. "Can I help you, officer?" Marcus asked, his voice a deep, resonant baritone that commanded attention. He didn't sound like a suspect. He sounded like a judge. Vance didn't like that tone. He wanted submission, not conversation. "I said step away from the car. Let me see your license and registration. Now." Marcus didn't move. "Officer, before I provide any identification, I'd like to know the reason for this detention. Have I committed a traffic violation? Is there a crime in progress?" This was the moment Vance could have de-escalated. He could have explained the call. But Vance had an ego the size of the county, and he had been challenged. "You're loitering," Vance snapped. "And you're failing to obey a lawful order. Give me the ID or you're going into cuffs." Marcus sighed a sound of profound disappointment. "Officer, I am filling my gas tank. That is a transaction, not loitering. And under the Fourth Amendment, you cannot demand my identification without reasonable, articulable suspicion of a crime. I am asking you for the record, what crime do you suspect me of committing?" The air around them seemed to get hotter. A few truckers at the diesel pumps had stopped washing their windshields to watch. A family in a minivan near the store entrance had their phones out. Vance realized he had an audience, and he felt the need to perform. He stepped closer, invading Marcus's space, trying to physically intimidate a man who had stared down mafia hitmen in courtrooms. "I don't need to explain myself to you," Vance sneered. "People like you always think you know the law." "People like me?" Marcus asked, his voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerously quiet. "And who exactly are people like me, officer?" Vance didn't answer the question directly, but his sneer said it all. "People who drive cars they can't explain. Now stop stalling. Whose car is this? Is it yours? Stolen." Marcus straightened his jacket. "This vehicle belongs to the United States government. I am on official federal business. I suggest you check the license plate before you continue down this path, officer. You are making a very expensive mistake." Vance laughed. It was a short, sharp bark of a laugh. "Government vehicle. Yeah, right. And I'm the president. You think putting a generic plate on a luxury truck fools me? You're done." Vance didn't look at the plate. He didn't call dispatch to run the tag. He was too invested in his own narrative. He reached for his radio. "Dispatch, I've got a non-compliant subject at the stop and go. Possible stolen vehicle. He's resisting." "I am not resisting," Marcus said clearly, turning slightly so the bystanders' cameras could catch his face. "I am asserting my rights. I have offered you the opportunity to verify the vehicle's registration through your computer, which you have refused to do." Vance had had enough. He couldn't let this man talk down to him any longer. "Turn around," Vance shouted. He didn't wait for compliance. He lunged forward, grabbing Marcus by the wrist and spinning him around. He slammed Marcus against the hot metal of the Tahoe. The sound of the impact made the watching crowd gasp. "Hey, he didn't do anything," a trucker yelled from the next island. "He was just getting gas," shouted a tourist. Vance ignored them all. He wrenched Marcus's arms behind his back, twisting the shoulders painfully, and slapped the handcuffs on. He ratcheted them too tight.
It was a petty, vindictive move. Marcus winced as the metal bit into his wrists, but he didn't struggle. He knew that any movement would be interpreted as resistance. He stood perfectly still, his face pressed against the side of his car. "Officer," Marcus said, his voice muffled but steady, "you have just assaulted a federal officer. You have detained a federal auditor without cause. You are currently violating Title 18, Section 242 of the United States Code. I want you to remember this moment because it is the last time you will ever make an arrest." Vance snorted. "Shut up. You're under arrest for disorderly conduct, loitering, and resisting arrest." Vance then did something that would seal his fate completely. He opened the driver's side door of the Tahoe. "I'm searching the vehicle incident to arrest," he announced to no one in particular. "You do not have consent to search that vehicle," Marcus shouted. "That vehicle contains classified federal documents." Vance ignored him. He rummaged through the center console. He found a leather wallet containing a badge and a federal ID card. He pulled it out, looked at the gold shield that read, "Office of Inspector General, United States of America," and laughed again. "Nice prop," Vance said, tossing the badge onto the passenger seat as if it were a wrapper. "Where'd you buy this online?" He saw a ruggedized laptop on the seat with a government asset tag. "And a stolen laptop, too. We're adding grand larceny to the list." He grabbed the laptop and the badge wallet, threw them carelessly onto the dashboard of his patrol car, and then dragged Marcus toward the back seat. He shoved Marcus inside the heat of the vehicle, stifling, and slammed the door. As Vance drove away from the gas station, leaving the Tahoe abandoned at the pump, he felt a surge of triumph. He picked up his radio microphone. "One in custody. He's a talker, claims he's a Fed, got a fake badge and everything." The dispatcher's voice came back sounding hesitant. "Copy that, 204. Did you run the plates on the suspect vehicle?" Vance waved a hand dismissively, even though no one could see him. "Negative. I'll run them when we get to booking. I got everything I need right here." In the back seat, Marcus Thorne sat in silence. He was memorizing everything. The time on the dashboard clock, 1:32 p.m. The speed Vance was driving, 55 in a 40 zone. The fact that Vance hadn't buckled Marcus in, leaving him to slide around on the hard plastic seat. Marcus closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He wasn't angry anymore. He was in work mode. He was already drafting the affidavit in his head. He knew the specific statutes this officer was violating. He knew the civil rights case law. Pennsylvania versus Mims, Delaware versus Prouse. This officer was driving straight into a legal wood chipper, and he was too arrogant to see the blades spinning. The drive to the precinct took 15 minutes. Vance spent the time whistling occasionally, glancing in the rearview mirror to smirk at his prisoner. "You know," Vance said, "guys like you always think you're untouchable. But in Pineville, I run the show." Marcus didn't respond. He just stared out the window, watching the town pass by, thinking about how much this was going to cost the city. When they arrived at the station, Vance pulled into the sally port and hauled Marcus out. He paraded him through the back entrance, gripping his arm tightly, marching him up to the booking desk. The desk sergeant was a man named Elias, taking 58 years old with 30 years on the force. He had seen it all. He was drinking coffee and reading a report when Vance burst in. "Got a live one, Sarge," Vance announced, pushing Marcus toward the bench. "Loitering at the stop and go. Refused ID. Resisted arrest. And get this, he's impersonating a federal agent. Found a fake badge and a stolen government laptop in his car. Sergeant Elias looked up. He looked at Kyle Vance, flushed and manic. Then he looked at Marcus Thorne. He saw the suit. He saw the expensive shoes. He saw the way Marcus held himself, chin up, eyes clear, absolutely fearless. And he saw the handcuffs digging into the man's wrists. Elias felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He had an instinct for these things, and his instinct was screaming that something was very, very wrong. "Impersonating?" Elias asked, his voice gravelly. "You sure about that, Vance?" 100%, Vance said, slamming Marcus's wallet onto the high counter. "Look at this. Looks real enough to fool a civilian maybe, but not me." Sergeant Elias picked up the wallet. He opened it. He felt the weight of the badge. It was heavy, solid brass. The ID card was high-security holograms micro-printing a smart chip. Elias had served in the military police before joining the force. He knew what real federal credentials looked like. These weren't fake. His hands started to shake slightly. He looked at the name. Marcus Thorne. Senior Auditor. Clearance level top secret. Elias looked up at Marcus. "Sir." Elias said, his tone shifting instantly from skeptical to respectful. "What is your date of birth?" Marcus rattled it off calmly. "Badge number 4992-Alpha. Supervisor's name is Director Roberts, contact number 20255500199. Elias turned to his computer. He didn't run a criminal background check. He ran the badge number through the National Law Enforcement Telecommunications System, NLETS, with the federal flag. He hit enter. The screen didn't just return a result. It practically screamed. A red banner flashed across the top. Subject is a sworn federal official. Active status. DHS Priority Level 1. Notify supervisor immediately. Elias felt the blood drain from his face. He looked at the vehicle registration Vance had tossed on the desk. He typed in the plate number. U.S. Government. Official use only. Elias stood up slowly. The room went dead silent. "Vance," Elias whispered, but in the quiet room it sounded like a shout. "You didn't run the plate." Vance looked confused. "I told you I knew he was—" "You didn't run the damn plate!" Elias roared, his face turning purple. "This isn't a fake badge, you idiot. This is a senior federal auditor. You just arrested a high-ranking federal official for getting gas." The color vanished from Kyle Vance's face. "What? No, he was loitering. The manager said—" Elias cut him off. "I don't care what the manager said. Uncuff him. Now." But before Vance could move, the door to the inner office flew open. Police Chief Harrison stormed out. He was a man of 50, usually composed, but right now he looked terrified. "Who ran this plate?" the chief demanded, waving a printout. "I just got a call from the Department of Homeland Security in Washington. They want to know why one of their assets has gone off the grid in my jurisdiction. They're tracking the vehicle's GPS. They know it's here." The chief looked at Marcus, still handcuffed on the bench. He looked at Vance, who was standing there with his mouth open, looking like a child who had just broken a priceless vase. The chief didn't ask what happened. He knew. He walked over to Marcus. "Officer Vance," the chief said, his voice icy cold. "Give me your keys. Give me your badge. And give me your gun." Vance stammered. "Chief, I was just—" "You are relieved of duty effective immediately," the chief barked. "Get out of my station before I throw you in a cell myself." Vance handed over his equipment with trembling hands. He looked at Marcus one last time, waiting for some kind of reprieve, some sign that this was a misunderstanding. Marcus just looked at him with eyes like flint. "I told you," Marcus said softly. "Check the plates." The chief personally unlocked the handcuffs. "Mr. Thorne," the chief said, I cannot express how sorry I am. This is a catastrophic failure of procedure." Marcus rubbed his wrists, looking at the deep red indentations. He didn't smile. "Chief, I appreciate the apology, but apologies don't fix the violation of my civil rights. They don't fix the fact that your officer assaulted me, and they certainly don't fix the culture that allowed him to think this was acceptable." Marcus picked up his credentials and his laptop. "I will be making a few calls. You should probably call your city attorney. You're going to need them." The fallout was swift, brutal, and public. The video from the gas station bystanders hit the internet within 2 hours. It showed everything: the calm, professional black man, the aggressive young white officer, the refusal to look at evidence, the unnecessary force. It was titled, "Federal Auditor Arrested for Being Black at a Gas Station." It got 5 million views in 24 hours. The Department of Justice didn't just open an investigation. They descended on Pineville like a storm. They audited every arrest Kyle Vance had ever made. They found a pattern of racial profiling that went back years. Marcus Thorne filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against Officer Vance, the police chief, and the city of Pineville. The evidence was irrefutable. The dash cam video, the Bodycam footage, the witness videos, and the dispatch logs proved that Vance had ignored every protocol in the book to make a bad arrest. The city settled for $4.8 million to avoid a trial they knew they would lose. It was the largest settlement in the county's history. The money came out of the city's general fund, meaning parks were closed, road repairs were canceled, and a library expansion was scrapped. The taxpayers paid the price for Vance's ego. Kyle Vance was fired, stripped of his certification, and charged criminally with deprivation of rights under color of law and false imprisonment. He pleaded guilty to avoid a lengthy prison sentence and received 3 years of probation, but he will never hold a badge, a gun, or a security job again. He works in a warehouse now, loading boxes, a permanent felon. Jim Miller, the manager who made the call, was fired by the corporate office of Stop and Go the day after the video went viral. The company issued a national apology and instituted mandatory bias training. But as we sit here and look at this story, we have to ask ourselves, what if Marcus Thorne hadn't been a federal auditor? What if he had been a school teacher or a mechanic or a doctor? What if he didn't have the Department of Homeland Security watching his GPS? He would have just been another man with an arrest record, another life ruined by a system that allows bias to masquerade as policing. Marcus Thorne won his case, but he didn't celebrate. He knew that for every one of him, there are 1,000 others who don't have the badge to protect them. This story isn't just about one bad apple. It's about the tree that feeds it. It's about the silence of the good officers who watched Vance operate for years and said nothing. It's about the manager who saw a black man and saw a threat. We have to be better than this. We have to demand that our public servants actually serve the public, all of the public. What do you think? Should officers be personally liable for settlements when they violate civil rights instead of the taxpayers footing the bill? And should making a biased 911 call be a criminal offense? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. These conversations are hard, but they are the only way we move forward. Until next time, stay safe, know your rights, and watch out for each other.